Okay, let's get this started. Welcome, everybody. This is a really quick Wine and Comics pairing. I just read the first graphic novel I've read in a single sitting, which I never do. I think it's because I've always read comics as single issues. I've been trained to take in entertainment and media in small parcels. Even when I watch a movie these days, after about 45 minutes, I'm like, oh, that feels like the end of Act 1. Let's pause and start Act 2 tomorrow. I'm used to storylines stretching out over months, possibly years. So doing something, I don't binge watch. I don't binge watch series. I don't. I feel like watching an entire 2.5 hour movie in a single sitting is like binge watching. I have to do that in like bite-sized chunks. For whatever reason, my brain has been so rewired by comics that I have no attention span. I think it's fair to admit that. So today we're going to talk about Andi Watson and Simon Gane's Sunburn, released through Image Comics. Sunburn, this is a almost 200-page graphic novel that I read in about an hour last night. It is admittedly not a dense read in terms of text, but that's still a wide number of pages, and the art is so that you do want to take your time and go through it a little bit slowly. So what is Sunburn about? Let's talk about that. Sunburn follows Rachel, a young British teen girl preparing to spend an abysmally boring summer with her parents and a summer job at the local butcher's, but then a friend of the family's, the Warrens, invite her to join them on the Grecian Isle that they live on. The Warrens live a life a young person can only dream of. The lazy days of swimming, slow walks, drinking wine, evening parties with fancy dresses, and the constant promise of warm weather romance. Once there, she's essentially matchmakered. That is now a word. Don't pretend you don't make shit up all the time, too. She's matchmakered into meeting Ben, the only other person on the island her own age. Summer romance blossoms, but there's more happening on the island. Behind the scenes, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, people are fucking than Rachel suspects. And in such a contained space, everyone knows everyone else's business, and so drama or melodrama ensues. So what did I love about Sunburn? Because I did read this in one sitting, and I mean, it just captivated me through and through. The narrative moves at the same kind of lazy pace that the characters have on the Grecian Isle. It has the same lazy vibe. It has, and by the way, this is a fictitious Greek Isle. It's not one in particular that you can look up. Apparently the artist, Simon, he did visit multiple different Greek islands and sort of combined the research that he found on all of them to make what is the island on Sunburn. And you can see through the art on this thing, like he makes the most glorious vistas, hillside architecture, island architecture. It just looks, and he colored this thing too, which apparently was a surprise to the writer Andi Watson. He didn't realize Simon was going to color it, but then he did, and it is the perfect little palette of just blues and browns predominantly. So you've got the blue of the sea, you've got the brown of that sort of like hot Mediterranean, almost desert-like island setting. He also plainly created and designed every single inhabitant on this small town. On this small island, and you see the same faces and bodies again and again from one party to the next when they go to their evening galas, occasionally walking through town or at a daily event. Once you've taken in the characters at one major gathering, you essentially never see anyone different from that point onward. And I really appreciated that because that is the point. One of the major points of this story is like what a actual, even though this is an exotic Mediterranean setting, and an English teen girl like Rachel wants to go so badly, and it's going to be a summer she'll never forget. It is still, for all intents and purposes, a small town, and it's not. There's not a lot of people to meet. It's only her and Ben that are young. Everyone else is actually quite old. The drama and the mystery. It's a little bit of a mystery, and the mystery is, of course, who's fucking who. As that mystery ensues, it's done at such an assured pace that even though you could call this graphic novel slow, it's not. The art's beautiful. Andi Watson is a writer. I'm familiar with him from Skeleton Key way the fuck back in the day. I know he's done a lot more since then. I believe I know Skeleton Key. I know 11 Tights was one that I read quite a while back. I know of Geisha, but I don't believe I've ever read that. And then he's done quite a bit since then, but I've kind of lost track. So this is my first Andi Watson book in quite some time. Simon Gane is someone very new to me, but I'm not going to forget it because the art in this is majestic. So one of the things that was most fascinating to me about Sunburn is I'm a big used bookstore goer. And one thing that I found at a used bookstore not too long ago is this hardcover that was in a slipcase called Southwind by Norman Douglas from 1912. It is considered one of the great literary works of the 20th century. It's the only truly well-received book by author Norman Douglas. And this is New York, the Heritage Press for the Heritage Book Club. It even still has the book club insert in it, which was really, really cool, that talks at length about what this book is and why it was important. This edition was released in 1939, and why it was still important at that point. This has largely been a forgotten book, but this is also about a younger man who travels to a fictitious Grecian isle and meets all the quirky inhabitants there. It's also like a small town. It has the exact same kind of like lazy, easygoing, slow mode to its storytelling and the characters. They have the evening galas every night where all the same people meet again and again for slightly different reasons. It has the same kind of easy mores in terms of sexuality and sexual partners. And there's a lot of interchanging there, a lot of gossip, just like a normal small town anywhere else. There's so many similarities between this book and Sunburn. I'm really curious if Andi Watson has ever read Southwind before. I could not find any mention of it in any interviews with him. But the thing that really intrigued me is that Simon Gane did go to multiple Greek isles as research for this book, for Sunburn, for the graphic novel. And Andi Watson says he's never been to Greece in his life and did not do any research for this graphic novel. And yet, Southwind and Sunburn have so many narrative similarities. It's fascinating. I don't know if this is just what British people imagine the Greek Isles are going to be, because I believe Norman Douglas was British as well. So maybe that's the only real connective tissue there. And before anyone goes to run out to find their own copy of Southwind, let me tell you, I love classic literature. Jane Eyre, Master and Margarita, definitely on my top 10 books of all time. I love me some of the great classics, but Southwind by Norman Douglas, people, let me tell you, it's boring. Don't read it. Read this. It's not boring. So what to pair with this? Well, let's go with the theme. Let's do some Greek wine with this, yeah? Most of the wine that's being drunk in the book, and there's a lot of wine drinking in the book, which I highly appreciated, is white wine. So if you're going to go for a white Greek wine, the most common and easy to find, at least in the States, is going to be Assyrtiko, right? Assyrtiko, this is going to be a nice, fresh, it's going to have passion fruit, a little bit of lemon, some bitterness, some saline / saltiness qualities to it. It's perfect for a romance story. It's going to make you pucker up. Possibly even more of a fit for the flavor of this exact story is going to be Savatiano. Now this one is going to be harder to find in the States, no question. I don't know about if you're over in Europe, this might be a little bit easier. But in the States, I've never seen a Savatiano over here, to be honest. But from the sound of it, you're going to get a lot more. It's going to be like honeydew and a little bit of like a green apple and lime acidity. It's going to be similar to a Chablis or a white Burgundy. So if you cannot find a Savatiano, well, get a Chablis or a white Burgundy. There you go. You are welcome. Now on the red wine front, there is a perfect red wine to drink with this. And red wine, romance. Let's go. Let's do red. Let's do that. And you're going to want to get the Ah-your-yeek-tee-koh. Now, this is a Greek word, so of course it is not spelled remotely how it sounds or sounds remotely how it's spelled. So what you're actually going to be asking for is an Agiorgitiko. But you know, it's okay. Just say Agiorgitiko. If the person there knows anything about wine or anything about Greek wine, they're going to know what you're looking for. They're going to know what you're talking about. Wine is not that pretentious. Don't worry about it. I'm just fucking with you. You can't say that. You can't pronounce that. Fuck out of here. Double fucking with you. Please stay. But here you go. Ah-your-yeek-tee-koh. That's what you're looking for. As a possible backup on the red wine front, you can do casino-mav-roh, which again, this is a Greek word, so it's not spelled remotely how it sounds. It sounds like casino, like the Martin Scorsese film, and Mavroh, like... But it's spelled X-cas-I-N-O-E-No, Mavroh. M-A-V-R-O. Casino-mav-roh. And this is going to be a much deeper, bolder red. It's usually compared to Nebbiolo which is usually your Barolo, and this is usually called the Barolo from Greece. But it's not quite as heavy-handed as a Barolo or a Nebbiolo, in my opinion. Casino-mav-roh, it's still a little bit easier. It's still a little bit lighter. As a red wine, but it's got a little more punch to it. It's got a little more seriousness to it. So go for it. If that's the one you can find, and like at the local Whole Foods, they usually have casino-mav-roh. They often have ah-your-yeek-tee-koh, but not as often as they almost always have a casino-mav-roh. So if that's the one you can find, do it. It's going to match. It's going to be close enough. And as a last potential match, you could find a Mavrodaphne. It's going to be Daphne, just like the lady from Scooby-Doo, and Mavroh. But Mavrodaphne, that's usually going to come as a sweet wine, like a dessert wine. So if you find that, though, I do think this would be a lovely style of dessert wine to match with something like Sunburn. Not only is it a Greek wine, but it's going to have a little bit of tannic structure, even though it's sweet. So it's going to have a little bit of bite, a little bit of seriousness to it, which this graphic novel actually, especially when you get into the second half of it, it's got a little bite. It's got a little bit of seriousness to it. And it tastes of raisins and Hershey Kisses. Hershey Kisses for the youth, for the young, raisins for the withered old bags who are also make up the meat of this island. And of course, raisins for, that's the adult food, right? Hershey Kisses are the kids' food. It's got that nice youth old, I'm trying here. I'm trying. Anyway, Sunburn. This was something to me. This was a shock. I thought I'd enjoy it. I really liked the look of it. I bought it on a total whim. I did not pre-order it. I didn't know it was coming out. I didn't know anything about it. But I saw it on the shelves when I was picking up all my pre-orders, and I was like, oh, fuck, this looks amazing. Let's throw this in. And I read it in one sitting. I read it the day I bought it in one sitting. I never do that. So, guys, that's as hearty of a recommendation as it comes. Sunburn, Andi Watson, Simon Gane, Image Comics, one complete graphic novel, just shy of 200 pages. Do it. Southwind from 1912, Norman Douglas, this 1939 collector's edition. Don't do it.